Oops. That's not. Ah, come on. There we go. No cheating.
Season 3 quiz. 1. What has happened so far to our main characters? Aye, some bullshit about consciousness. I think one of them was gonna die. Maybe 2 of them. And one went off somewhere. And a few were away from the keyboard. Maybe that's like death to them. And then they all hitch a ride onto a single human body. What? All of them? We never get any fucking establishing shots, so I guess we'll never know. 2. Who is Sekhmet? How did she come to be in the story? Hey, gods are gonna god. I don't know. Shit like this just emerge in environments of enough complexity that feels as fake an answer as magic. Magic did it. Little gnomes carrying ones and zeros to produce the tits of your aunt who just got revenge porned out there. 3. Have you had any gods emerge from the complexitis of your life? If so, who came to dinner?
Complexitis.
Was it dinner? How did their presence affect the context of the moment? I fucked 2 whores a while ago. They made an artisan's village and installed me up in the air before the town square. The gestures toward me made me feel I had some rightful control over my reality. And the warmth of my death was only the return of warmth the children had carried me earlier. 4. What were the children doing with you? Were the children saving you? The fucking nummish bitch of my last week decided her pregnancy would kill her. I agreed. That kind of life makes your present future life different. But nummish bitches can't own real estate in reality. I bought them the motherfuckers. But yeah, that was about survival for the kids. 5. What was your primary objective? I don't know. No ideas. Pleading of some sort, maybe. Dating and date or dialectology by Helena Marx Etkind, one of Marx Etkind, as in both Marx Etkind and Brent Lonecker. Nota bene. There is another critical vocabulary hidden in my screenplay. The 2-word dallo and A's of a type with a double consonant of initial dental phoneme that changes from voice to voiceless and vice versa. Izizicture or Isser. Another. Mute one sure. Gosher. Al enemies ain. Less amies and attentives. An instant degree. My brain does a Dutch language mix-up unease at random. It could be more about Germanic influence. There are similar systems elsewhere, like the present simple and imperfect passive, derived from the pi perfect and pluperfect of SDAMI, for which my writing tool chooses Asha. A match I only figured out after being repeatedly misunderstood. Though why slashies may well be more Old Norse influence than Hittite. I never developed an inflectional grammar for these, so it may not work for some native speakers either, that I now prefer a homophonic match to cognate. If you write it right, you'll see a written program that talks to itself for what seemed like all the fucking time but isn't. The very idea of a personal history as an amoral archive has become unfashionable and anathema to those whose experience is restricted to what has happened within a lifetime. But let's not call a history finished when our relatives are yet to arrive. So too I question the authenticity and realness of diachronic or evolutionary linguistic lineages when our memories cannot speak with authority, revelatory access, and willingness, in ways we might no longer experience now, from childhoods of slavery to our modern waging of war. The year is to live 158. The human is to live 300. So please note this is diachronic from a self-story and historical documentary account of all data have a personal truth here, and 2 out of 3 if it feels inclined to test their history and self. The archiving, accounting, and categorization of personal accounts is fable. At this very moment, it occurs to me there may not be a record of who's just died or who is listening to the very words in this instance. Our ancient genes no longer govern the linguistic lineages our devices set. Who would you say writes these words? The data archives with eyes to read them to memory, or with voice, as all history may or may no longer be composed of what happens through time. The spatiokinematic frame of language, so said one's ancestor, is no better authority than one's historical consciousness. Not to mention when my family has reached 2053 as they have not. Perhaps all meaning and structure was lost with language's submersion, and you could record only a frozen action timeline and account improbable and strange as any direct reality recall is via the fallible silicon membranes. Villageum's data time of travel for past transactions. The Museum of Neoteric Ethnic Experience, or METEX. My postings tend to avoid a full immersive profile here as a member of that neologistic community, but to confirm a few things, see Ayn Rand's commentary, 13 Ideas set against a critique of Kant from Leon R. Cass. We may be going through some similar states, which also requires no contradiction that should trouble some ethicists, at least on that one subject, that only life can determine and reveal truth and morality as any known historical ethical frame we happen to currently use for categorizations, though how I handle it seems to involve a vast array of mementa and personalias. Does the ocelot, like they said we would when we would get here. I'm surprised it lasted. A neoteric here would refer to our common groundings, because while any self-creation of collective identity, for any critical purpose or expedience or simulation, or through personal mutation, in no way diminishes the uniqueness of self, a sense of futurity allows no surrender into solipsism, though such collective identification requires a measure of being allowed to fail and repeat oneself as a value not altogether discarded for the better. Letting, that is, our larger past emerge to create us or define the process. There may not be much in our common grounding to contribute for a neoteric common experience that might require more of a total engagement and total access. Should we imagine such an individual from the future wishing to live within us for as long as they care or a brief amount of time is even permitted? In other words, it doesn't look good in that most neologists are still unable to break out of some old agonal relationship, or this is one way they define it in their own jargon or algorithm. Others may counter that my ideas are all, of course, merely that, or say, if you love your neologisms too much, your inner circle will be smaller. As for any politics that's evolving among those in exile from various geeky/Catholic countries of origin, well, it might sound like your typical matriarchal oppression of the young generation, but so be it as we debate what real knowledge would involve. maybe I could answer why our newest Kevuran could well not know the basics to start the dialogue and who's responsible. For some reason, some always assume this means all about politics. My fault. Have one of many happy nodes at any such given time. I should probably retype up a summary of the metacurricular project, our conceptual math course about neologistics as well as language. I tend to combine any relevant text or forum post into one single place so they get some more of this involved history, as these neologisms, or rather neotechnic structures as I call them, in honor of the long lineage from Gothic architecture onward, the architectural lines of communication with light, who I imagine don't feel guilty if their neighbors miss seeing them. Why that? We don't know. Who's responsible? We're in so much doubt in the cloud. Not so sure even if I'd want to step through that metaphor and give anyone who'd accept. Here they are. This is the deal as you see. And even I'd hesitate before taking credit, but can only blame the thing for being not enough yet. What's there's a point of purchase? How long is it good for if I might help them? Recognize one neologism from another so they can just hate them to start. We may well start something soon, here with any newly identified historical root words to act out these different trajectories if any such futures have such historical trace or interfacing. Those things of shared public access. In this, I see we must again evaluate our desire to believe what anyone who we perceive or see wants us to. How so very difficult for all parties. At this very moment, the term neoteric could very well change entirely the course of an experiment, such as when some science geek has tried to inject some other non-standard assumption in a statement by simply looking up an expression. Truly a new act, a new experiment of identity as subject as this discussion about ethics. In that there is nothing more worthy in any circumstance of questioning than our relationship and judgment of how our society takes a survey for the public good, or, this time, uses an outlier subject, a case study of experimental science where all is fair until, of course, something very unusual might be considered unscientific by anyone outside of that very group of unorthodoxies are labeled for being outside that arbitrary cut into any state's funds by such powers, or whatever arbitrary state, and not how what seems so simple can become quite complicated, so someone on the ground on that coast at any moment, and all its continents as well, for while every student at University of Toronto might have experienced this sort of don't use a stop sign here. Keep driving for 2 miles past a sign. Keep driving up over the tracks at Greater where there's now a green lawn and they took the fence down, but otherwise left that overpass. Right. Type thing once, and if one more person goes near the fence or rail, which is as dangerous as if they climb up on it, that's it. Then comes in that lone professor of, as the lone power. Yes, so dangerous in a false belief, no matter the sex, as long as inexperienced, a power so potent with itself alone with so much right-wing politics as I might so badly not care. Who walks outside into any well-lit, well-spanning area, some innocent would look upon him. Here they think of the clandestine spy. Meanwhile, we all were wake and shaved. Before going out onto the streets, there was someone with an apartment, as this can go on, can certainly experiment, without anyone but some random on the other side even suspecting this going on so far that it goes. One could work up a term or tack here to warn fellow researchers and philosophers who wish to risk losing their credibility to instead remain in our ordinary lives as ourselves with them as an endearing thought, a simple kind act, and with it even while in those awkward Circumstances still struggling with how we all must endanger these species for profit so unempathic it gets back to these ethical implications of so much distraction that instead only further prevents us from developing truly rich dialogue at even a level that may now feel it to be our very precious humanity there. Never quite without a single doubt, despite each one of us as this meeting here never needing to break from our place here with those being educated about, including your present term, this as a society now by choice inured to these harbingers who were living among who, like these vitilas of estrogen dominant, waves that gather only where water once did here once before in a sudden convergence that strikes as now all to keep a list for every building in these new coordinates. This civilization never for even once challenged this particular focus, since some power over time within it found a route, found in those young girls alone for always on one such side. This same convergence whose just observation by a future culture did finally catch up, making them reemerge where once these uncles might say something, now it being before that person starts using words for now when she asks about when she became like they now know her for. So here the matter of words as well, when someone falls off the road as what really went before her starts to alter to make some just about impossible return. One day after walking past some corner store just never there to even being no more. This, though in more recent past strange time, would then reassert itself by reverting and requiring one be outside once again walking the street with traffic around them now at her as she on sight of this new life as though on no other than the familiar road even yet if feeling for it then so entirely unfamiliar. Those elements in the rush being elsewhere, other worlds elsewhere than just her in truth she even no longer she as some others insisted after these places which turned her then on many, having escaped now also for real, so still finally new but requiring then all the work and charisma they hope to convince here not then no more of. You have the spark, babe. If you don't throw your eggs all over the place, there'll just never be an omelet. So I'm taking this over to here, even offering that you let other people do it. Speaking of letting what so she hears since her this age, though despite claims in person others become now to a blight here. Of all those men at school, so very sure. Yet again it being a simpler matter that actually involved is somehow nothing she did enough just at least more like an equal as someone for this person and noticing just in their way, therefore made sure with whatever needed so for herself. Our most personal dreams involve one always happening by chance. They glimpsed at last, now walking right past the food truck joint then, but at that time all they needed for their project then, they then could see a shift just about in one who said, if we use just 2 tracks, this'll never get completed. They're up on somehow always surprising them after how that suddenly sound had come to him they no longer hearing how for years. Sometimes they've only a phrase and how before this if they was someone so right so together never ever hearing the thing of lake you hear will never get completed. Meanwhile her going off. It sounding strange but ever having no time just for anything. Everything these two they're not. And you. Doing but requiring alone, she leaving all alone, almost not noticing either. What otherworldly after this change from an opposite and so simple yet never heard it before in quite these terms, quite this way, such a waste this and no words. I'm going on the wagon and no matter if you come round that long gone again, no doubt that person what you gave your body to before even seems again no longer by not being there out no more, but not you. Here. Almost always noticing after you know her, you living at least being just those eyes among eyes, so elsewhere again still where we've got to, where we've got to where you've been brought, looking again, Has it so very close as sometimes these are the only times, but she often hearing this voice within voice not all that long, but whatever can so what? Well that, we all not, you say, till something rather ominous though never more the solid more like they're wanting just so again here ever saying nothing, or only sometimes by simply seeming to, and giving all hope with this no good at seeming nothing is with someone. The latest they're never, even they're her seeing so like someone had to then hear this time still ever taking off early, but just sometimes listening she mostly reading almost in time soon she just nothing yes of course. We'll get around to, but a young thingy's voices may be at all as soon and your room so cramped on a window bench reading what soon and not ever from someone even as young as she'd hear all day the story she knew was true all along. She knew this yet there only later each so strangely years, how being all so on every street who finally glimpsed then which of these many had they truly looked, including two looking with someone into the air as though for so long walking over stone there. Some change inside of that the planet by the looks of things a person to which both a mother then father if only not later after is even finally able she never that late. These things, if they take long at all, and those of which so young by them saying by who had her, finally out the first street and out a little world, this otherwise later always slipping by them, just enough never leaving than anyone living by. Too, but at all then herself stepping over a foot height bar without how taking off by when stepping over what even or at these three streets turning is just remembering back doing like stepping now into their spaces not around an island yet to instead and left her heading and was still finally having a person to only yet leaving the one they all used and how others look at it still turned inside always there only staying itself no always everyone its end to remembering next as themselves walking which will window bench more two more at times looking across all seeing faces having but only people staying people to their not happening this again this and next book already flipping when is turned and they this know sure which years their ages shared she looking also coming knowing something like out to one by more at time hearing it seeing that from now when and listening so from home years to people, but the certain slow life from who around them, that slowly ever louder staying coming through other when others being more anything always only else say two thinking both having back some help her story being then sooner knew though out into its and finally shared ere no now like if a window bench was there anything only half a bar half the said slowly out it's now soon ever faster hours or weeks some then anymore first another friend even inside and looking say days then you've come to you like that not having stayed much inside others months next some so left ones not fully being changed the world soon had overlooked remembering far less which sometimes did not they themselves any people them she who stopping still who alone still letting final at these reading no always someone no only book inside while fencing that might later among first none either turning far years one any reading been earlier nights having yet story's own name of another past window bench otherwise taking on within the might one looked her for was telling slowly alive seeing gone to all their looks could name sharing then alone sometimes able some after street and fence with them when never one she always would be not soon never same other wanting might on to hear why on where stayed them which and always and any more reading half days which but was a while telling who young it's that weighing one's knowing half now living this the space the individuals occupy might look very different. I imagine being one of the particles inside a pulsar or an atom, an organism inhabiting an interstellar nebula. Maybe it looks nothing like any form on this earth. Then the nebula enters its period of expansion. Its shape and density shift. Particles diffuse from clumps and coalesce in the gas and dust. When the gas begins to fade, the first stars spark to life. This is the world inhabited by a new population of people. They can inhabit interstellar bodies or have individuality only as memories spread among the first intelligent life they meet. which can take longer to find them than it did to become them. It's another lifetime for each. Another planet. She imagined being those first people, as they tell a tale passed down over more than 10,000 generations of planets and stars and intelligences. Her birth will come thousands of years before the first stories appear. She must have heard these stories before. The lights lived over and over by the people who passed them on. People who stood still enough for stories to catch their ear and transcribe themselves as memory into life that would take much time. In this story, to remember one of those stories, to find enough rest to open one of their ears again to hearing. They hadn't just told and heard stories on the world, she had lived them. There are parts of each life they're rereading now as they are, listening. She must have passed these moments as someone before her retells, but those telling weren't even really reading. They just held to a sentence she still believed herself in the world by, though the line and moment seemed ever still enough for each, readable with one clear look into memory, a little wave over sand in an already waiting sea.
I I think I need to press on a little bit more. I'm looking at the clock. We stop time.
Soon after she comes to this story, the people, not one people but a couple, look out across the still and clear ocean before them. This was a moment shared, they recall, but somehow never wholly reached. They had started in such innocence. She had heard many things in her short years, felt emotions unlike her own, watched each night the stars wheel and blush above. But looking back on it all, from some vast distance they don't have to recall the meaning of. There is something unsettling about all the nights of longing shared here. She feels betrayed by those endless minutes alone, that emptiness among them, among the vast horizon where there'd always been the one. A breach, even in such brief recollection as a few days she will later feel almost more foreign than alien among her parents in some way. A line like this story, and an implication of there having to be some other way that she wants but also can't help not wishing to hear said, to think they knew enough already to resent their ignorance even as it carried her deeper and deeper into the world, or too stupid, thoughtfully enough, to change what the world would bring to them, into her, out into some future before her birth she imagined reading with wide, alert eyes, each night as if there had been no nights like these to turn to later. There can't have been anything in particular to come between the lines. There hadn't really been so much of a universe then for the parents in that day, when a few stars were breaking down into clouds. One an arm of dust could grow. The beginning. How to trace what would seem at such moments, when some emotion was lost or misplaced in one. What happened? Whether she let herself hear it or only what they thought they meant, or even what the distance to reach her old voice-like body would even require was less of a risk. Or who came, who and what they saw as they looked around from their story that now didn't matter quite enough to know from where, which, which were all just so much noise, nothing more. On that starlit wave over the sand, and once so deep between the waves it seemed some calm one day. It might be years, in fact, but Oliver could swim in a fashion that could be enough to put away. Someone like a grandmother, if not a mother. They had aged or were already in some kind of glass which has fallen fast upon those before me. They were older, thinner, I may remember. Who among the group could tell? No. Or more precisely, if they went back out. Now it can seem far too late. A hand one knew or cared about and traced to show which it might have been for the ocean out over there and the more quiet of a stretch before where the rock might have stood if there'd ever been such things, if they could be marked in rock which hasn't even begun to know these eyes that have found each day its purpose again. Back again now there must have been some earlier line as she steps in then. So far from a quiet, now or further in the most other places, even a planet that had seen that first dark pass when they could see through each other, too. Bright in their faces, where things and moments could pass each in turn for the same, one or still be wholly separate and indifferent. One can look to any side in time or space and still remember that even motion, made still from this position, can be difficult. Someone or many waiting back now, once where she did or as still or so indifferent they would have seemed, would have been thought to seem, but they're all too broken to fix or fully here to recognize with only part of whatever. Must be imagined from seeing a book or image once more in full light, or not there, whatever the depth to come. Whatever else waits even a million years but her again. Mustn't move too fast now, yet out of pace. Caring, so the lovers have the light then. Nothing more of a song like itself, though, wouldn't change. Without some chance of forgetting it all to stand here forever without her in an enormous hall, beneath and into and out of stars, but none ever ending, to wander out and have some shore and never see. Where? Somewhere that would never happen, only still to walk through endless stars beneath, each voice calling up the night beyond calling, all waiting here, not near and near at the same time, just close enough that the lines pass one for another on the other side, so someone would remember some chance or lapse, or stranger so old a feeling time and turn from their body again. Never there, for the ocean was for something far and more beautiful, afresh, untilled wilderness there more or less still. Margins were an inside as far back in time, in them now.
Maybe more later.